Hello everyone, this is lesson 9 of the Circle of Life. Welcome back. Hope everyone is safe and well. So today, this in lessons would ordinarily be 2 lessons because there would be a practical. So what I'm going to do, on Show My Homework, you'll have the link for a video which shows you how to carry out the practical. We'll talk through it as well. And then you can watch the video to just actually visualize what I've explained to you. So for a starter activity, quick recap to a couple of lessons back. We've talked about photosynthesis a lot. Can you try and remember what the equation for photosynthesis is? Okay, so there's that pause symbol there. You don't have to write it down. Save all the writing for that written phase at the end. Okay, so the pause symbol is there. If you try and work out, using the words at the bottom, what the equation for photosynthesis is by pausing the slide now. Okay, let's see how we got on. So you should have had that the reactants, the things that react together, are carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. So those are the things that the plant needs to carry out photosynthesis. And the products, the things that are made or produced during photosynthesis, are glucose and oxygen. Okay, so fantastic if you remembered that. Brilliant, well done. So during photosynthesis, the plant makes glucose, and the glucose is the whole reason that photosynthesis is carried out. So glucose made during photosynthesis, it's got lots of different uses within the plant. We've talked about some, so respiration, growth and repair, all of those things, but also some of the glucose is converted into starch. So remember, glucose is a sugar, so it's quite a small molecule, whereas starch is lots and lots of glucoses joined together, so it's a much bigger molecule, okay? So it's perfect for storing. So these plants convert the glucose to starch, so they make the molecule bigger, which allows it to be stored for the plant to use when it can't photosynthesize. So remember, you need sunlight for photosynthesis. So at night, or if the plant is kept in the dark for any reason, the plant will still need the glucose, but it can't make it. It can't make it because there's no sunlight. So at that point, it will use the starch that has been stored in the within the plant. Okay. So some of the glucose that is made in photosynthesis is stored as starch. Plants also use the glucose to convert it into cellulose. Remember, cellulose is what makes the cell wall in a plant cell, and that's what keeps the plants strong, gives them their structure. And glucose can then help to make proteins, which the plant needs for growth and repair. Okay. So we've just discussed quite a few ideas of what glucose is used for. Just have a recap. You don't have to write it down. You can talk with someone else if there's someone else in the room with you, or if not, just in your head. What uses are there for glucose in the plant? If you pause the slide now. Okay, so you could have had, they make cell walls because they are used for cellulose. It's used in respiration. Remember, glucose and oxygen are needed for respiration to happen. They can be stored as starch, so when we take those small glucose molecules and make them into bigger molecules, which are stored for and the plant can use when it's dark, and to make proteins for growth and repair. Okay, so those are the main reasons why glucose is needed in a plant. So this bit, we're going to start talking about the practical now. So you can do this any way you want. You can either pause this now and watch the link for the video, or we can talk through it and then you can watch the video to consolidate. Okay, to consolidate what we've talked about. Okay, so If you want to go and watch the video, then just pause this here and go over now. If not, we'll talk through this. So how do we know if a leaf contains starch? The test for starch is iodine. Most of you in your lessons in another biology topic will have used done food tests, okay? So we used iodine in those food tests, and it's an orange-brown liquid that goes black or dark blue if starch is present, okay? So if there is starch, the positive test is that the orange-brown liquid goes to a black or a dark blue, okay? But before we just put starch on a leaf, we need to do a few steps beforehand, okay? Because remember, leaves have protection, and the starch would be stored in cells, so adding the starch to the outside of the leaf wouldn't necessarily tell you if there was starch inside the leaf, okay? So the very first stage is that the leaf is boiled in hot water. So this is done to kill the leaves. There are still lots of chemical reactions and things going on in the leaf, even after you've taken it off a tree or a plant. So you need to put it in hot water to stop all of those reactions happening. Okay, so the very first stage is that the leaf is boiled in hot water to kill it, okay, to stop all of those reactions. So the leaf is then put into ethanol. Ethanol is a type of alcohol, okay, and this starts to break down all of those cell walls, and it allows the chlorophyll, which is the green chemical, to be removed. So the ethanol the leaf is put into ethanol for all of the chlorophyll to be removed. So the leaf will no longer be green, okay. This is because it makes it more obvious to see whether there's a colour change. So rather than a leaf being dark green, it goes like a light green or whitey colour. And when you add the iodine to it, you can see the colour change more obviously. So the leaf is then washed with water to get rid of excess ethanol. Sometimes it's put back into the boiling water to get it off. Sometimes it's just rinsed off. Okay. And the leaf is generally put onto a white tile. Again, this is so that the iodine can be applied and you can see the colour change. So the leaf is washed off with water to get rid of any excess ethanol that's stuck on it, put on a white tile, and then the iodine can be applied to see whether the starch is present in the leaves or not, okay? And you can see this picture here. So you can see the iodine has been applied here and it's gone black. So the fact that it's changed colour means that it's positive test, and it means that starch is present. Okay, so what I want you to do now, if you haven't watched the video yet, go and watch it now. If you have, we're going to do this activity, okay? So put the following stages of starch testing in order. Okay, so you've got that pause symbol. You don't need to write it down, just in your head, put them in the right order. So if you do that and pause the slide now. Okay, let's see how we did. So you should have had the leaf is boiled in water to kill it. So number 4 is the first one. Then the leaf is boiled in ethanol to remove the colour. Okay, so number 3 was the second one. So far you should have had the order of 4, 3. Then the leaf is washed with water to get rid of that excess ethanol. So 1, so 4, 3, 1. And then finally the iodine is added. So you should have had the order of 4, 3, 1, 2. Okay. Fantastic if you got that right. Well done. So why would a leaf have no starch? We're carrying out this test to find out if it's got starch. But if the test was negative, if we didn't see that colour change, why would the leaf not have any starch? So we've discussed how when glucose is made via photosynthesis, it then gets converted into starch, okay? So we said it goes from that small molecule to that big molecule. So why would a leaf not have any? So if a leaf can't photosynthesize, okay, it still needs glucose in order to respire and to make proteins. So even when the leaf can't undergo photosynthesis, there are still lots of other processes going on within the plant that means that the plant still needs glucose. Okay, so the lack of photosynthesis doesn't mean that everything else stops. The plant still needs glucose. Okay, so if the plant isn't making the glucose via photosynthesis, but it's still got all of these processes going on, okay, the plant could be in the dark or it could be nighttime. It means that the plant would start to break down the starch stores that they have within their leaves. Obviously, the longer the plant is in the dark without access to sunlight, the more starch it's gonna need to break down. Okay, so when we then would carry out this test for starch, it would be negative. We wouldn't see that colour change because the plant has had no access to sunlight and therefore hasn't been able to photosynthesize. As a result of this, it's used up all of its starch stores, okay, because it still needs that glucose to carry out photosynthesis, to carry out respiration and making proteins and things like that, okay. So I've said really quickly about the size of the molecules, what's the difference between glucose and starch. So we've talked about plants using glucose and storing starch, but how are they different? So like I said earlier, the glucose molecule is really, really small, okay? So it's easy to break down and use straight away by the plant. So the plant can use it straight away for all of these processes, for respiration, for making proteins, okay, because it's nice and small, easy to break down. Starch is a much longer molecule, so it's harder to break down, which makes it really good as storage, okay? So if we have a look at this diagram here, you've got your glucose, which is really simple, would be really easy to use, but it gets converted to starch, which means that it's a much longer chain, okay? It's a complex molecule. It's much more difficult for the plant to break this down. Therefore, it's good as storage, okay? So the plant can break it down if it needs to, but it would use this first because it's much simpler, okay? So it's a bit like humans, if you eat sugar, you get that energy much more quickly than if you eat something starchy like pasta, which keeps you a bit fuller for longer, okay? So it's slower release energy. It's exactly the same in plants, okay? So you can see that pause symbol up in the corner. Have a read through, decide which of these is false. So if you do that, read through and pause this now. Okay, so what you should have had as the false answer is D. So we'll read through the true answers and I'll explain why they're true. So you boil the leaf in water to stop the chemical reactions. Remember, when you pick a leaf, it will still be alive for a short time. It'll still have the chemical reactions going on. It needs to be killed, okay? You need to stop all of that happening in order to carry out the test. So you do that by boiling it in hot water, okay? Then once it's boiled in hot water, once all of the chemical reactions have been stopped, you then boil the leaf in ethanol to remove the colour, okay? So this makes it much easier to see if there's a positive test, okay? The leaf is washed with water to remove excess ethanol. So imagine, take it out of the ethanol. There's still ethanol on the surface. The test may not be as accurate when you add on the iodine. So it needs to be washed off to remove excess ethanol. And the last one is the false one. Iodine will turn black if starch is not present. Well, iodine turning black is a positive result, okay? So that means that starch is present. Okay, if starch is not present, there will be no colour change. Okay, so fantastic if you got that one right, well done. If me explaining how these are true hasn't allowed you to fully understand, you can go back in the video and rewatch. Okay, so really quick recap. How can we test for starch? We've talked about 4 main stages in testing for starch. What are those 4 main stages? Okay, so have a quick think. If there's someone else in the room, you can have a chat with them. Okay, so if you have a think and pause this now. Okay, let's see how we've done. So, first stage, boil a leaf in water, then boil it in ethanol, wash off the ethanol with water and add iodine. So those are the 4 main stages, okay? So you all should have watched the video by now. If you want to see it again, then you can pause this, go watch it again, just to make sure that you've got those stages really concrete in your head, okay? That you're sure about the stages of testing for starch. Okay, so our written phase. So working towards describe a brief method for testing starch. Okay, so that's those 4 points that we've just talked about. Explain 3 reasons why plants need sugar and starch. Explain how the conditions leaves are stored in affects the presence of starch. Explain the difference between sugar and starch using the idea of molecules, okay? So like always, 10 to 15 minutes on this. This is what we get in class, so give yourself that time, okay? Try and get as far as you possibly can. If you're struggling with anything, obviously we're not there to answer questions. Go back in the video and rewatch anything you're not sure of, okay? So 10 or 15 minutes, give yourself that time and pause this slide now. Okay, so let's see how we've all done. So for working towards, you should have had the way we're able to test starch is to boil a leaf in water, then boil it in ethanol, rinse it with water before putting iodine on it. Okay, so I've actually missed rinse it with water there, but that's an important stage as well. So make sure you've got that. Okay. Explain 3 reasons why plants need sugar and starch. So they need sugar and starch for respiration, for growth and repair, to make cellulose. Okay, those are the 3 main reasons that they need sugar and starch. So working towards, explain how the conditions leaves are stored in affects the presence of starch. So the presence of starch in the leaf can be affected by different conditions because if a plant is unable to continue making glucose by photosynthesis, okay, it will use up its stores of starch. If the plant is kept in the sunlight, then the plant will continue to photosynthesize and maintain its starch stores because it's using that glucose that it's making. If the plant has been kept in dark conditions, it's unable to photosynthesize, it's got no glucose, therefore it will break down the starch into glucose to use. This will mean that there are less starch stores in the leaf, okay? So if it's in the light, it's going to continue photosynthesizing, making glucose. It won't need to touch to break down the starch stores it's got. It's kept in the dark, it can't photosynthesize, it can't make that glucose, so it's going to use the stores. Okay, and then explain the difference between sugar and starch using the idea of molecules. So the main difference between sugar and starch is the length of the molecule. Sugars are much smaller molecules that can be broken down and used immediately. Okay, it's much easier to break them down. Starch is a longer chain molecule, which is much more difficult to break down and so can be used by the plant as storage to use and break down when it's unable to make glucose. For example, at night when there's no sunlight to carry out photosynthesis. So then we're going to write our sentence. Remember, it's not the colour or the level, it's the word. Okay, and make sure you put the reason in there too. Okay, it's really important to do this so you've got a sense of achievement, you know what you've learnt from this lesson. Okay, so if you write that sentence now. And then don't forget to go on to Show My Homework and do the 10-question quiz on there for this lesson. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sure you've all done fantastically well. Okay. If you want to send in any photos of your work that if you feel that you've done really, really well, then make sure you send them over. Okay. and you'll be hearing from me for our last lesson in this topic. Okay, keep safe, Year 7. Bye.